Hey guys, welcome back to the 11th installment of this very long Easement Act series. So today we're going to talk about section 42, 43, 44, 45 and 46 that will cover the extinction of easement part except section 47 and 48, which I will talk about in a later video because they are very big topics in themselves. And the whole Easement Act series playlist is linked right here. We have covered from section 4 to section 41. So any question you might have regarding those sections, the answer is probably there. So check that out if you feel it necessary, and if the answer is not there, the comment section is always open. Ask away. All that being said, let's begin today's video. Hey guys, my name is Akash. I'm a 4th year law student in South Calcutta Law College, and you are watching Lawve. Alright, so let's talk about section 42 then. When an easement right becomes useless, it becomes extinct. Now the question is, how does the easement right become useless? You see, according to this section, when an easement right becomes incapable at any time or at any circumstance to be beneficial to the dominant owner, it becomes useless and hence will become extinct. For example, let's say A has an easement right of drainage of water through B's pipe. Now, the local pond to which the water drained has been renovated by the municipality, and hence all direct discharges from the households to that pond has been restricted. Now understand that A's right of draining water to B's pipe has not been restricted here. He can still do that. B is not stopping it. But at the end of the pipeline, the water cannot now drain to this particular pond, and hence this pipe has been turned into a dead end. So the easement right of A exists, but it becomes absolutely useless because the water is not draining anywhere, and hence it will become extinct. Now, something to keep in mind in this section is that the use of the words at any time or in any circumstance makes it really difficult to make a easement right extinct through this section, because the use of words in these sections makes it impossible to extinct the easement right if there is any possibility, even the slightest possibility, that the easement right can again become beneficial in the future. And obviously,
कल किसने देखा है?
Now, section 43. Suppose these are two properties, property A and property B. Now, the owner of property A has an easement right of drawing out water from this well in property B for his daily usage. Fair enough, no problem at all. Now, the owner of property A builds a 5-story apartment on that property and sells those to 5 different people. Let's say C, D, E, F and G. These people, now being the dominant owners, should have an easement right of drawing their water for daily needs from the well, right? That's what we have studied this far. Well, not really. Section 43 says that if a permanent change has been made to the dominant heritage which materially increases the burden on the servant heritage, and the servant owner cannot reduce the easement without interfering with the lawful enjoyment of the easement right extinguishes. Now, you don't need Einstein's brain to understand that by this permanent change in the dominant heritage, the burden on the servant heritage has increased many folds. Because, first of all, now in place of one owner, there are 5 owners. And even each of those owners probably will have a water requirement which is more than the single owner that was A, because these are now lavish modern flats in place of a flat piece of land that was controlled by A, and hence the easement right will extinguish. Now there are 3 exceptions to this section. Exception number 1 says that if the change in the dominant heritage was made with an intention of beneficial enjoyment of the dominant heritage and the easement right is increased to the extent that it should be, the easement right does not extinguish. So imagine you take water from my well, my plot, and this is my well. You take water from this well for your household activities, right? Say this is your house. Imagine this is your house. The way you take the water is by coming to my land and taking out water in bucket. Now, obviously, you can't take a lot of water in this way, right? Your requirement is probably more, but because you don't have any other means, you take a small amount of water, the bare necessity that you can take, you take that, because it's impossible to take a lot of water through coming every time to my well and taking the water through a bucket. So you take the bare minimum. But one fine day, you install a pump in your land and start drawing water through a pipeline. Now finally you can draw as much water as you require for your household. So see, there was this change in the dominant heritage, but it was for the beneficial enjoyment of the dominant heritage, and it was within the extent that the easement right should exist, because the easement right was for taking as much as water required for normal household activities. Till this point, you were taking water less than that because you had no means. But now that you have the means, you can take as much water as required for your household activity. And thus, in this case, even though it satisfies the criteria of section 43, the easement right will not extinguish. Alright, the second exception is that if the increase in easement right is so slight that no reasonable man would complain about it, the easement right will not go extinct. In the previous example, this exception also applies. So I have a well that is connected to the underground water bed. Now the increase in water drawn because of the pipeline does not affect me in whatsoever way. There is no dearth of water there. And so I reasonably have no reason to complain about it. So you can see the previous easement will not go extinct because of two reasons, not only one. Do one thing, think of another example where the easement right will not go extinct only because of the second exception. Try that. The third exception is that if the easement is an easement of necessity. So if it is a necessary easement, a change made in the dominant heritage which increases the burden on the servient heritage will not be a good enough reason for extinguishing the easement right. Pretty straightforward. Section 44. OMG. Oh my god. Have you seen that film? You should. Anyways, act of God is a phrase that was made famous among the Indian masses by that film. Though the term used here is superior force, they essentially mean the same thing. When any servient heritage is permanently changed by a superior force in a way that the dominant owner cannot enjoy the easement right any further, the easement right will extinguish. However, if it was a necessary easement right of way, then the dominant owner is entitled to have another way assigned to him according to the provisions of section 14. You remember section 14, right? I talked about that in this video. Alright, no examples on this one. It's very simple, and the Bare Act itself has two examples for this section, and I cannot put any example in any better way than that. Follow that. Section 45. If either of the heritage is completely destroyed, the easement right extinguishes. Obviously, an easement right is imposed on the servient heritage. So if the servient heritage does not exist, on what will you impose the right? And it is imposed for the beneficial enjoyment of the dominant heritage. So if the dominant heritage does not exist, for whose benefit will you impose the right? But there is one caveat though. The word completely destroyed is a very key word here. In a case called Framji versus Framji, in that case, an outhouse got completely burnt, but four walls, the four boundary walls and some timber remained unharmed. The Bombay High Court held that in this case, it cannot be said that the property was completely destroyed or the heritage was completely destroyed, and hence the provisions of section 45 will not apply in this case. So that's probably something that you'd want to keep in mind moving on. Alright, so section 46, where the same person becomes the absolute owner of the whole of the dominant and the servant heritage, the easement right extinguishes. Just common sense stuff. The only thing to keep in mind here is the word absolute and whole. So the person needs to acquire an absolute ownership of both the properties. No lease rights, no mortgage rights, no tenancy rights, absolute ownership of both the properties. And he needs to acquire the whole of the property. Absolute ownership above whole of the property, not part ownership or undivided interest, nothing like that. Absolute ownership of the whole of the property. Only then the provisions of this section will come into play. So for example, let's say A has an easement right of way over B's property. Now A and B both mortgage their properties to C separately. C forecloses the properties and becomes the absolute owner of both the properties. The easement right will cease to exist. But suppose A and B mortgage their property to C as usufructuary mortgage, where C can use both the properties commercially and gain commercially from both the properties until the mortgage debt is clear. So understand that even in this case, C is in possession of both the properties and he's using the properties for commercial gain. But because he is not the absolute owner of the properties, the easement right will not extinct. He needs to be the absolute owner of whole of the both properties for the provision of this section to be applicable, which in this particular example, usufructuary mortgage, is not happening. Alright, so that's it for today's video. In the next video, we'll complete extinction of easement and move even forward. Till then, you can revise the Easement Act series here and you can see some of the other videos I make here. And follow me on the various social media platforms to connect with me, and always have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow know what you want to become. Have a good day. Cheers.